So your assessment of where we are, I mean, there was an agreement with other health unions. It's a 5% pay rise for this year, although that has to be balloted to the membership. This does seem to have a very different feel in terms of the demand, 35%, and the impact.
Yes, no, I think it does. I think, as Hugo was saying, this reflects. I've got a massive WhatsApp message from my niece, who's a junior doctor, when I asked her what she thought about this, and she says this is partly about pay, but it's not just about pay. It's about sort of feeling, working conditions are very poor. That, they see locums getting paid loads more. They see a lot of people departing. Western Australia, if you go out to London Bridge Station, you'll see a very aggressive ad telling healthcare professionals to sign on, get an $8,000 bonus if you go to sign on as a health professional in Western Australia, where their ads emphasise the sun shines even in winter. The NHS has a massive retention problem at all levels. It's actually slightly lower vacancies in medical areas, but voluntary resignations in the NHS generally were 50% up in September over a couple of years earlier. So I think there's one of the things here that you've got a profession that's feeling very undervalued, under pressure on pay, but also feeling increasingly burnt out. We've seen a big rise in number of NHS people saying the reason they're going is that they think their work-life balance is very bad. And quite a lot of the ideas that the government comes up with are, to recruit more overseas doctors. They use more agency staff. That costs a lot of money. It's a sort of quite big waste of resources. Or to increase medical training places. But actually the thing they really need to do is to sort out quite a long-term strategy about retention in the NHS to deal with that. And I think pay's got to be part of it. They're clearly not going to pay them 35%, but they do, I think, need to show that they get that there's an issue about the way in which junior doctors generally are treated, and work out a long-term strategy for dealing with this, because otherwise I think this is going to just rumble on and on and on.
So Conor Burns, Jill Rutter is saying that the government really does need to address junior doctors' pay, though not at the 35% level. But the Health Secretary's talking about junior doctors' leaders having a militant stance. Do you agree with that characterisation by Steve Barclay?
Well, I think what the previous rounds of talks with other sectors and other parts of the health service have shown is that engaging in constructive talks where both sides set aside deeply entrenched positions and try to understand where there might be common ground can lead to agreement. And I think what Steve Barclay is saying is reasonable, that to say that there is a precondition on the talks of a 35% increase in basic junior doctors' pay is not a reasonable position for the talks to proceed. The government's door absolutely remains open. The Health Secretary's message to the Junior Doctors Committee of the BMA is come in and talk without preconditions. As I say, other sectors, other parts of the public sector and other parts of the health service have done that have led to fair remuneration, fair settlements that they can agree with, the NHS backlog bonus, one-off payments over previous asks in terms of increase in basic pay. Let's talk, but let's set aside the preconditions and let's put the patients absolutely first and foremost in this.
Peter Carl, your Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streetingham, says he doesn't support walkouts by junior doctors. He thinks their pay demands are not achievable overnight, but he thinks they make a fair argument that junior doctor pay has not kept up with inflation. Now, obviously, as Shadow Northern Ireland Secretary, you cannot conjure up a figure, but do you think that junior doctors deserve more than the 5%, which seems to be the range of current deals, but obviously not as high as 35%?
Well, sadly, we can't negotiate with the unions from a position of opposition. We need to do that from a position of government, which we're aspiring to. But what you have to understand is that the economy overall is being run so poorly that we have the fastest drop in real wages on records. Mortgages still increasing after the mini-budget, the cost of living crisis affecting everybody. So you can't avoid the fundamentals of the economy which aren't being run properly, which is why we need to get growth into the economy. So Rachel Reeves, as Shadow Chancellor, her growth plan and the transformation plan we have for our economy is the first step. But we also need to learn the lessons, and it's a good time to talk about this and reflect on it, from the Good Friday Agreement. Negotiation is important and it works. Negotiate, get in the room and don't leave the room. We've already lost 300,000 cancelled operations and appointments because of the failure of this government to negotiate with the unions across the NHS. They need to make sure that they can get into the room. Everything's on the table for those first conversations, start whittling it away, but make sure you can have a process for negotiation and you can persist with negotiations. And we know from our last 13 years in office, when the last Labour government, there was no widespread strikes in the NHS because we got the fundamentals right of running the economy and we knew how to negotiate.
So Conor Burns, Peter Carl says Labour knows how to negotiate, and it looks like Steve Barclay does know how to negotiate with other health unions, but he just can't seem to get into the room with the junior doctors leaders.
Well, what Peter has said is wrong. I mean, the Health Secretary has said he's very happy to have conversations, negotiations with the Junior Doctors Committee of the BMA if they will lay to one side the precondition of the 35% pay rise, which they are saying they won't talk to the government without that being agreed. They've got to get into the room, the two sides have got to talk, and a resolution can be found, as Peter acknowledges and you've acknowledged, has been the case in many other parts of the National Health Service and indeed the public sector more widely. Sit down and talk, abandon the preconditions, let's get an agreement that puts patients first.